again, these are just like industry chemicals that the water, this is my understanding, the water treatment industry adds to the water, to make sure that I think it's potable, really, is the end goal. I'm not going to read all of them, but like here's a nice smattering. Acetic acid, all types of aluminum, aluminum chloride, aluminum chlorohydrate, aluminum chlorohydrate polyalbanium chloride, aluminum hydroxychloride, aluminum sulfate. So if we're worried about aluminum, we might have a problem here. Amino trimethylene phosphonic acid, ammonia anhydrous, ammonium chloride, ammonium hydroxide, ammonium sulfate, ascorbic acid, and bentonite. Interesting. Just general blended coagulation chemicals, diethylenitriamine penta, AC, dipotassium orthophosphate, different forms of iron, fluorosilicic acid. That's the one that we're talking about. Welcome to Influence to Death, your guide for navigating the wild world of wellness influencing. Hi, and welcome to Influence to Death. My name is Victoria Lafont.
I'm Hannah Wright, and today it's just us, and we're going to talk about fluoride.
We sure are. I also, always, we have master's degrees. We're MSs.
Yes.
Forget to say that. We are co-hosts every single time.
Yes, This is
I also was like, oh, we have to do housekeeping every time.
Yeah.
We forget where to tell people they can find us. So should we do that now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We are a podcast about the wild world of wellness influencing. So our goal is to, in a very balanced way, discuss trending topics in the world of wellness that are highly influenced. You can find us on Instagram at Influence to Death. Our main hub is Substack. So you can find us there. For $5 a month or up, you can become a subscribing member and you get an extra episode per month where we talk about some of the wackiest shit. Those episodes are really fun. It's like fun. The pressure's off.
Yeah, it's very relaxed. I feel like, we're pretty relaxed anyways.
Yeah, that's true. And then anywhere you get podcasts, Apple Podcasts, if you like us, leave a review. If you don't like us, leave a review. We actually have gotten some salty comments lately, and I have to say, happy to see it. We're not infallible. We're just two people. So let us know what you think. And in today's episode, I feel like for me, that's coming out more than ever because I'm like, I don't know, Hannah, how many hours have you read and researched?
A bunch. I've learned more about fluoride than I knew very little before, and now I know a lot.
I actually was talking to Tim Sharp yesterday. He sent me this paper that is going to probably be a very influencing paper for certain populations, but is highly dubious. And I called him immediately and I was like, I don't want to know anymore. I'm done learning things. Would you please?
Ooh. Which paper is that? I'm excited.
I'm a little hesitant to say. I'll tell you off mic. But my point was, please stop teaching me things. I'm full up. I don't need to know anymore. I'm just getting more and more confused at this point.
Yeah.
So Hannah has, in Hannah fashion, done a great job of organizing all of our ideas. Should we just dive in and start talking about this? And
so I just want to say that there's so much more beyond what we're going to cover today. There's just not enough time to go into each little corner of fluoride and health. So we're just going to cover as much as we can. And I think all this information will be really useful for anyone who is interested in learning more about fluoride. I mean, fluoride has been controversial for a very long time. I think since it went into the public water supply in the 1940s, you can look up and see ladies in their lovely dresses and their hair done of the style of that time with signs, standing, protesting fluoride. So it's been this controversy for a really long time. But yet, if I'm being honest, I thought I knew about it, and now I'm like, oh, I don't really know enough and I need to learn more. And so if you're like me, you may not really have a good idea of what fluoride is and the health effects of fluoride beyond just kind of what you hear, the little snippets that you hear. And now with the MAHA movement, I know our last episode, we talked about MAHA with Kelsey Keener. We didn't talk about fluoride. We talked about farms and public health, but fluoride is a big part of their agenda. That's all I'll say for now, but we can
There's so
talk
much
more
here.
about that.
Yeah, I think Kelsey, there was a line that Kelsey said that I was like, damn, I haven't thought about it like that. But he's like, I think they're masters of the algorithm, which I think any persona that gains popularity has to be. It's like Dr. Sharp, right? I was talking to him yesterday. One of the smartest, most careful thinking, critically thinking. He's like trained himself to think in this like incredibly critical way. He's so humble about what he knows. Nobody knows who he is, right? It's like,
yeah.
But if, God, Huberman sends out a tweet about whatever he happens to be thinking about when he's, like making his smoothie.
Yeah.
Like whatever, what does Huberman put in his smoothie? Rocks, right? It's like, then like everybody on planet Earth is going to be like, you should put rocks in your smoothie. So there has to be this like ability to, I don't even want to say for bad or good, but to like manipulate public perception in order to even get popular enough to have influence. Yeah. And so, they're good at it.
Speaking of Huberman, I actually listened to some podcasts on fluoride because, again, like with the methylene blue, I did the same thing. I was just curious what was being said and how the message was getting out there. And he was one of the top ones that came up on my search. And it was like his overview of fluoride. I have never listened to his podcast before. I like had a hard time with it. It was like very, I don't know, I don't want to be mean. It was like boring to me. It wasn't like registering in my brain. I couldn't retain the information. So I
just wait till you see him with his shirt off, Hannah, and then it won't be boring anymore. That's like the most famous video, or at least the one I'm most familiar with is, and it's like a joke in our house because my husband, he loves hiking and like for years and years wanted to like lead people on hikes and like have them do like kettlebell workouts on hikes and like carry kettlebells up mountains. So there's this like famous video of Huberman hiking with this kettlebell with his shirt off. And there's, like 20,000 comments of women being like, I'll do whatever you say, kettlebell daddy, whatever. Like, totally inappropriate moniker they gave him. Anyway, that's part of the reason I think why he's so popular. People don't like to think about that, but like if you look good, you get popular. Yeah. It's a lot easier. Wow. Okay, but he's boring. Yeah, you got to see him with the shirt off. That's the ticket.
Okay, I'll try that next.
Well, did he have a conclusion? Was he like pro?
I actually didn't listen to the end. He was just kind of doing a little bit like what we do. It was just kind of like this man talking at me, and I was like, I don't want to like. I feel like that would register with some people, but like for me, it wasn't like doing it. And so, but he was basically just covering let's just talk about the facts about fluoride.
Cool. We're going to try.
It seemed very balanced.
Awesome.
The part that I listened to.
That's great. Okay. Good job, Huberman. Maybe you're more than a six pack. And he's like a neuroscientist, I think is his training.
An ophthalmologist, I think. Like he's an eye neuro special. That's his specialty is like neurology and eye health.
Interesting. Okay, so that's why we picked this topic is because it is one of the biggest talking points in the MAHA movement. I have seen a few tweets, X's, what are they called now? That it's X, that RFK has put out about, getting fluoride out of the drinking supply. There are actually a few states. My understanding is that they have taken fluoride out of the water, Utah being one of those. I saw Kentucky is on the short list of states to get it out of the water. My husband and I are about to move there. That's personally interesting to me. So we just thought, well, maybe we can learn more. And I'm like you, Hannah, I feel like I've heard people talk about it for years. And there's so many ideas in my head every day where I'm like, is that actually true? Like, I don't know anymore. Yeah. So, okay, should we go through just some basic fluoride facts?
Yeah, let's start there.
Okay.
Take it away.
You can cut this out if you want to. Do you know it's the Addams Family where they send Wednesday and Pugsley to camp and they dress him up like a turkey? He's like, take it away. And he does this little turkey dance. Eat me. Okay. Andrew and I quote that to each other not infrequently. All right. So fluoride is the ionic form of fluorine, which is the 13th most abundant element in the Earth's crust. That's a fun, like 5th grade science fact. So you'll see fluorine. God, I used to have a chart of elements, like the how many ever, the periodic table. Yeah. That fluorine is on that chart, and then fluoride is the ionic form of that. Food sources are really interesting to look at. Food sources of fluoride include tea. Matcha is very high relatively in fluoride to other foods, and it has been touted as being very good for your teeth. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but I've read that in multiple places. Seafood that contains edible bones or shells, because fluoride does bioaccumulate in bones, medicinal supplies, and then of course fluoridated toothpastes. Dietary fluoride is absorbed rapidly in the stomach and small intestine. This is cool. 1/4 to 1/3 of the absorbed fluoride is taken up into calcified tissues like your bones and your teeth, whereas the rest is lost in the urine. And that's something that I'm sure you saw too in the papers you looked at, if you have altered kidney function, you have a buildup of many different types of compounds in your body that the kidneys will usually excrete. Fluoride is one of those. It mainly comes out via the kidneys versus the GI tract and feces. In bones and teeth, fluoride can displace hydroxyl ions from hydroxyapatite to produce fluoroapatite or fluorohydroxyapatite. I'm going to give a little disclaimer right now. There's some big ass words we're going to have to pronounce today. Please be patient. I am historically poor. There's actually a B-reel of me somewhere butchering words for NTA.
We are not chemists, so this is not our area of expertise.
And then reading all the time, I'd never said these words in my life. 99% of the fluoride in your body is in your bones and teeth. And that's going to come up later because one of the kind of claims that people talk about with fluoride is that it calcifies your pineal gland or it calcifies soft tissue. So it's just interesting to see okay, well, most of it being 99% is in bones and teeth, but the amount steadily increases during your life. So interesting to know. The recommended intake for fluoride is expressed as adequate intake, AI, if you're not AI, artificial intelligence. Don't want to be confusing. If you're familiar with the way that nutrients are recommended, there's RDAs, AIs, and that's based on the data that's available that shows how essential a nutrient is for humans. And so that's the same here. There's limited data available to determine the population needs and it's not considered an essential being a technical term nutrient. Despite producing denser bone, fracture risk is not reduced with fluoride. There's actually some evidence that non-vertebral fractures may be increased, so fractures that aren't in the spine. The only known association with low fluoride intake is the risk of dental caries acting through both pre-eruptive and post-eruptive mechanisms. The American Dental Association supports fluoridation of drinking water, which we could probably guess. So those are just some basic facts. I think most people are familiar that there is fluoride in most drinking water. Just in talking to people about this topic, I have a client in California who I'm still close with, and I just happened to mention with her the other day, we were on the phone that we were doing this episode, and she was like, oh, 2 of my siblings were born in a place without fluoridated water, 2 were born in a place with highly fluoridated water, and then her and her brother were born she was like, I think it's just, fluoridated, but it wasn't. She didn't have a lot of knowledge on it, and she was like, my mom always said that my 2 first siblings had such bad teeth because they were born in this area without fluoride in the water. And I was like, huh. There's a lot of anecdote that's around.
Oh yeah,
I think so.
Yeah, and in our drinking water, so as you can probably gather, fluoride is naturally occurring. So some places have really high natural fluoride in the water, some places don't. But since they started adding it to water, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services recommends a level of 0.7 milligrams per liter of fluoride in our public drinking water. And it actually used to be higher, up to 1.2 milligrams per liter. But then in 2015, they lowered it all the way down to 0.7.
Yeah.
And back in the day, well, I can go ahead. Should I talk about the history of how we started doing that in the first place?
This is a really cool thing. Yeah,
it is. So if you want to click on the links we have in the show notes and you can read these papers. I love history of things like this, just history in general.
Yeah, that's totally your jam. It's historical, epidemiology, where they dig through the pipes and they find old H. pylori skeletons with blueberry fragments. Remember that study? That's how they figured out that.
Oh, that's right. That blueberries could kill H. pylori.
Yeah, and it was, I don't know what the name of that. It's a medical anthropologist, maybe is what it is. Medical historical anthropologist.
So. Medical anthropology. Yeah.
That's your jam.
So fascinating.
Yeah.
So here in the United States, where the fluoride, where we the origins of adding fluoride to water, synthetic fluoride, it was observed that there was something going on in certain areas where they did have higher, what they would later figure out was fluoride in the water. By the 1980s, dentists in Colorado areas with high natural fluoride noticed that the native community there, some of the people had brown stains and mottling on their teeth, and they called it Colorado brown stain. And I think initially, I'm guessing they were oh shit, these teeth are really bad. But then they realized that the people wherever the stain was the greatest had the highest resistance to dental caries or cavities.
I also just think that's the funniest name ever. Colorado brown stain.
Yeah. So what that is actually called, the real name is fluorosis, and that is still something that can happen. It happens when you're exposed to higher amounts of fluoride when you're a child. Like the risk, I think, is greatest between ages 3 and 8 when your enamel is forming.
Mm-hmm.
And so eventually they realized that that was from fluoride from like their well water, and they would switch people to a different water source, like a spring, and then it would go away or not develop. So they figured out that what was going on was the fluoride in the water. And some places just have really high amounts naturally. More
Sure.
than 23 countries in the world are endemic fluoride areas, where approximately 100 million people are suffering from dental fluorosis. It's been shown that 40% of the population has developmental enamel defects, and 20% have fluorosis characterized by diffused opacities that are mainly mild. I don't really know what that means.
Yeah, you can see it. Like sometimes it's like, I've just looked at pictures where it's like there's like
where it's
white,
like light.
yeah, there's
The
like
white
spots. Mm-hmm.
And I've met people who have that. Like several of my adult friends have those, and they always said it was from fluoride when they were a kid. And I honestly didn't know what that meant until now. And now I'm like, oh, okay. So it could have been maybe they had a combined intake that was just too much, like from getting the varnish at the dentist to using fluoride toothpaste to fluoride in their drinking water. And then,
Yeah.
so that's something I want to kind of touch on is like, how can we control and understand how much each person is actually getting? If it is in public water supply, that's adding to your total daily amount. And if you're getting all these other exposures, and if you drink a lot of water, could you be ingesting like way more fluoride than they're planning on you ingesting? They're like, oh, this is a safe amount, but what does that really mean for each individual?
There's one paper I saw where they were like athletes, like people who do manual labor, they're going to drink more water.
More water.
Yeah, and I want to come back to this, Hannah, like in my mind, just like put a pin in it. Like all these people that have fluorosis, if they've done epi studies on them to see like, do they have reduced IQ and intelligence, which is something we're going to touch on. Like what are they, do they just have like hyper strong teeth? Like what else? So, but I know we're not there yet, but I'm just like,
that's really interesting to think about. It really is. So back then they figured out that 1 part per million of fluoride was optimal for preventing cavities, but not giving you dental fluorosis. And they suggested that water be fluoridated with an optimal level of 0.7 to 1.2 milligram per liter, which I think corresponds to parts per million. And then, like I mentioned earlier, in 1945, the first city to fluoridate its drinking water was Grand Rapids, Michigan. And they fluoridated it at the 1 part per million, which equals 1 milligram per liter of water.
Mm-hmm.
And now fluoride is used worldwide for the same reason that we use it here in the US for dental health.
To make people dumber.
So, okay, we are going there. Are we? Is that what's happening? That is a theory.
That's a theory.
I feel bad saying conspiracy theory sometimes. I was thinking about that with this episode specifically because I'm like, come on, like, I don't know. It just discredits, it's not fair to just tell someone they're crazy.
You're right.
They have thinking outside of the box.
I think like me, probably more than you, I err on the side of being like, I'm putting air quotes around this. These conspiracy theorists are crazy because I've been around them for so long. I'm like, I'm so tired of just hearing about like chemtrails and
I know
lizard people. Like I used to work in a medical office and somehow, have I told this story where the guy, I won't say the doctor's name, but his information got out to all the people who followed David Icke, who believes that like truly believes and tells his audience that like reptilians are running the government. And so like all these people would call the office and come in and make appointments. And they were like 100% convinced that like this reptilian race of aliens, or I think aliens, was like running the government. It's like, I guess there's grades of conspiracy theories.
Yes.
But like once you're around it enough, you're like but
yeah, I know.
I also agree with you that it is disrespectful. It's like some of those conspiracy theories turned out to be legit.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially around public health. It's like, it's always good to ask questions. Like, come on. That's why we're here. Like, you have to question what people are telling you, what the authorities are telling you. I think that's really important.
I agree.
Yeah. So like I said, fluoride is used worldwide, but not all countries do fluoridate their water supply. That may be because some places have naturally high levels of fluoride and they actually have to remove fluoride from the water because it's so high. I think there's some places in Italy where it's like, it would be 30 milligrams per liter or something like insanely high if they didn't take it out. And then some countries add fluoride in other ways. In Thailand, they fluoridate milk that they give to preschool and elementary children. And then in Switzerland, they fluoridate their table salt, which is kind of interesting. I also wanted to point out, because you mentioned in the beginning that with the MAHA movement, a lot of places in the US are actually starting to already take fluoride out of their public water supply. Back in 2011 in Canada, in Calgary, Canada, they did remove fluoride from their public water. And now in 2025, they're adding it back in because of the increased rate of cavities during that period.
Yeah.
So we have that linked if you want to read it. I thought that was interesting just to note. And then also in, under the history bullet, our ancestors, whoever they were, like wherever.
The lizard people, the alien.
Yeah. Well, probably not them because I don't think they're from Earth, right?
Yeah.
But archaeological digs can show us that they did have fluoride in their bones and teeth. Humans were exposed to fluorine, I guess. Is that right? The correct way to say it?
Fluoride, I think, is the mineral. Yeah.
Yeah. But this was obviously naturally occurring and not synthetic because, as we wanted to point out, fluoride used in our water today is synthetic. It's, I guess, it's like created. It's not from naturally occurring. Yeah. Is that the right way to say it?
Girl, okay. So maybe should we talk about the chemistry call-in? We had to call a friend. What TV show was that? Like
I know what you're talking about. I don't remember.
You hit the buzzer. Yeah. And anyway, I hit the buzzer and I was like, we need a chemist. Please, somebody come in and explain this. A lot of times on, like, for instance, like I looked at like the state of Indiana, the state of Kentucky, these different state websites describing their water treatment. They talk about fluoride being this like naturally occurring mineral in rock. And it is this naturally occurring mineral in rock. But it is also an element. A form is an element. A form is naturally occurring in rock. And then there's a form that is synthetically derived, I guess is the way you'd say it. It's kind of hard because it's like at the end of the day, everything goes back to it came out of the earth. But it's been like created in this way.
A process of industry.
Yes. Okay. So
not like they're going to the rocks and digging at the fluoride and breaking it up and then putting it in the water. They're taking byproducts from industry. So like, I just want to say before you start this was really hard for you to find, like to figure this out.
Yeah, I think partly just because it's like not my field. It's like somebody who's a chemist or somebody who's in like water treatment would be like, oh yeah, it's just blah, 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 blah. But like for me, I'm like, just like a health nerd that is interested in learning more. It's not talked about on the facts, the Grand Rapids, Michigan water facts. It's like not on that page. So you've got to do a little digging, but I'm sure for other people, it's just common knowledge in their field. Yeah. There's this claim that I've heard for 20 plus years that the fluoride that is in our water is the like result of industrial waste. So like the way that the narrative goes, I've even heard like nuclear waste. Have you ever heard that from fluoride? It goes
like, oh God, don't want that.
Totally. Meanwhile, Andrew and I are moving to literally Paducah is nicknamed the Atomic City, USA. So stay tuned for how that goes. Won't need night lights for very long. We'll just glow in the dark. So the narrative goes that it's like this industrial waste product and they needed something to do with it. And so, they were like, well, let's put it into the water or sell it to make money. And then that kind of like dovetailed into we'll dumb down the populace so we can do whatever we want and make these decisions, because the people will be dumber. And there are a lot of studies that are examining, does it have neurological effects on people, specifically kids, although they're looking at adults too, or does it lower IQ?
It does. Spoiler alert. But we'll talk about that more.
Okay, yeah, I'm really curious about that. Okay, this is a great episode because I think, for just like a moment, we talk about, our bias in every episode, which is, I think, really appropriate.
Oh, we haven't done that yet. I guess we're just doing the history right now.
Yeah, and so kind of going into the like, where the hell does it actually come from? Right, they're not like soaking rocks in water and making this like mineral decoction and then by hand pouring it into the water supply in every city. But I think with this one, it's like normally I feel myself like really drawn to one side or the other of a topic, or like I feel like I have like a stand. And with this, I really just feel like I have no idea if I am like pro or con.
Yeah.
It's a big question mark for me. So, and then in the context of everything that's happening, we're going to talk about that. Like, what is the magnitude of effect on your health from fluoridated water versus you're going to hear the list of everything else that is like intentionally added to water for good
Mhm.
reason. You know, there's like logical reasons why it's added to water. It's like, and it doesn't have a positive health effect. Like it's not there to like help our health. I don't know, Hannah, what is your...
I know. That's how I feel too. It's I feel like I'm more confused than I was originally, but possibly now erring more on the side of caution around fluoride, at least as far as like how you're exposed to it. So I actually have used, I have a 5-year-old and
Mhm.
we have avoided fluoridated water intentionally since he was a baby, by filtering it out. I don't know how well that filter works.
Yes.
Maybe we have been drinking fluoride. I have no idea, but that's what I was doing. I did not let him use fluoridated toothpaste because of the swallowing risk.
Mhm.
And this is all based on my previous knowledge of the effect of fluoride on IQ
Mhm.
and the pineal gland. But at the dentist, we do the topical varnish. But now, after reading the research on that, which we'll also talk about, I'm like, is that even helping? Should I even be doing that?
Yeah.
But this is like a completely personal like share. He has cavities, and
Mm.
so when he went to his first dentist checkup at 2, they said he had cavities, and I was shocked. And I said, I mean, I physically, my face was just like, what? And they were like, yeah, you shouldn't be giving him like sugary candy. And I was like, he's never had sugar
Mhm.
ever. He's never had juice. He's never, and I think they didn't believe me, which
Yeah.
of course I was just like, God damn it. Like, are you serious?
And I can just imagine you're not a trad wife, but you're like going through all of the steps of like grinding the chocolate by hand, adding the honey, and
Yeah, pureeing all his ground beef, like
yeah.
sauteing the ground beef and pureeing it for him and giving him not raw egg yolks, but like boiled egg yolks and all the stuff. But with us, what it ended up being is that he had some problem with his gag reflex for the first like 2.5 years of his life.
Mm.
So once he started solids at 6 months, he would vomit pretty much every meal.
Yeah.
Because if it wasn't completely smooth and there was any kind of surprise, anything like seed or like a tiny bit of fibrous stuff, and it touched the back of his tongue, instead of just kind of like gagging and spitting it out, he would just projectile vomit.
Oh my God,
So
Hannah.
that was like a huge part of it.
Yes.
So we couldn't do baby led weaning or anything like that because everything had to be smooth. There could be no surprises with his food. It was super stressful. It's a whole other thing.
I like how you
story,
call it a
but
surprise. I'm like, yeah, that's a surprise, dude.
So because of all of that, it eroded the enamel on the back of his front teeth and his
Yeah.
far back ones.
Yeah.
And so that's where he had the cavities, where everywhere where it was hitting,
Mhm.
stomach acid was
Of
hitting
course.
every single day for like 2 years. So he had cavities there. And I don't think it has, because of our personal situation, I don't think it had anything to do with like fluoride being in
Mhm.
the mix.
Yeah.
And now he's had no new cavities. His teeth are great.
Good.
And I still don't use fluoride. I use hydroxyapatite.
Mhm.
So we can talk about it at the end. But anyways, now I'm like, I don't know, the same. Like my mind is all like mixed up because this is way more information than I thought we would find on fluoride. Like I had no idea how complex it is at all.
Which I think is the exact reason why we and people who are more educated than us on this topic need to be having public discussions about this, because I'll tell you what's not going to explain it is a fucking tweet. That is
Right.
not going to explain the situation. It's not going to even skim the surface. I mean, maybe somebody is talented enough to like write it all out in how many ever characters or less, but this topic is so heavily influenced that there needs to be like the adults in the room need to get together and like really come up with what's best. And I think I want to reiterate just again, like, because I keep seeing this come up in like comments that people put on our post or like in emails that we get, where I can feel there's this tug. They have been listening to media, podcasts, news stories for so long where people don't state their bias that they just assume. I think people just assume when they're like hearing a voice from their headphones that that person has examined their bias and they're like speaking at you from this balanced standpoint. And that is the furthest thing from the truth. So just to like reiterate that, like the reason we talk about our biases is so that you actually know, hey, we're two people. We have, these experiences, these inputs, this knowledge that is informing what we say. We're actually telling you. And other people have those too. We all do. But if they're not saying it up front, you're just going to have to like figure it out yourself. And you really need to think about that before you buy whatever they're trying to sell you, is the bottom line. Even if what they're trying to sell you is like to follow a certain political team, right? It's like maybe the most important because it's nationwide. So just to like make sure that that's really clear. It's like really important to us, you know, in the way that this podcast runs. So I wish you could tell me what to think, Hannah. It would make me feel a lot better living in the unknown.
No, I think at the, like, with that, because it is so complex, your like brain is kind of spinning. You're like, whoa, what do I do? Like, what's the right thing?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I think the conclusion I'm coming to is that like, we know that fluoride does have beneficial effects on oral teeth health, like preventing cavities, but also it is not an essential nutrient. And without it, you're going to be okay. Like, it's not like you need it like for optimal health. I mean, the only thing it seems to have benefit on is preventing cavities. It actually has. And also I found some research showing that low doses might benefit the gut microbiome.
Ooh, that's cool.
Higher doses are bad for this. Of course, like, you know, you have that very fine line. It seems to have a really narrow margin of when it's beneficial versus when it's not. And so to me, that's kind of like, I don't understand I do from like a public health dentistry like point of view where they're trying, and that's what it comes down to. It's like public versus individual health. Like, it's a totally different thing. Like, you can't. So that's why I hope with this episode we kind of provide some information, put some questions out there where you are able to like go research that on your own and become more informed for your own health decisions instead of just like, you know, following, like you said, the one tweet or something.
Yeah. You may come to the same conclusion, but for a different reason, which is very important to understand why something works or why it doesn't, not just because somebody told you yay or nay. Welcome to our lives. Like, I feel like that's why I called Tim, to be like, I don't want to know any more things. Just let me believe my
brain off,
my dumb ideas. Please. Wow. Okay. It's so interesting. So maybe let's talk about, where does the fluoride in our water come from?
Yes.
Because
this is so cool that you figured this out.
And I hope it's right. Really, like, if there's somebody who's been in like water treatment for 30 years, please email us at influencetodeath@gmail.com and be like, hey, yeah, you got it. Or, hey, dumbasses, you forgot this whole this whole section of ideas that we, you know, are very familiar with in water treatment. So yeah, to kind of see like, okay, is it true? Is it an industrial waste? Yeah, it is. So I'm going to pull up this super awesome guy. Kyle Carter is his name. He is a chemist in Missouri. Let me pull up our messages. We've been messaging each other on Facebook. So I asked Kyle, first of all, hey, you from, you know, just like a very cut and dry chemical perspective, give us the difference between the different forms of fluoride, right? So that is fluorine, fluorite, and fluoride. So here is what he said about that. And then if this gets to be too lengthy, or Hannah, if we are like, okay, this is too boring, we can cut it out. But he did a great job of just breaking this down. Fluorine is the name given to the element on the periodic table, but he says it pretty well never exists in this exact form in nature. Or sometimes fluorine is the name given to the diatomic gas that fluorine exists as in nature, F2. This is similar to how hydrogen exists in nature as H2 or oxygen exists in nature as O2. So it seems like for fluorine and being an element, it's just like, we know that that is, but it's not practical. It doesn't exist in nature like that. Cool. Awesome. Point number one for Kyle. So then fluoride refers to the negatively charged ion of the element fluorine. This is basically just a fluorine atom that has gained an extra electron to give it a negative charge. This is the form that exists as in ionic fluoride salts, such as sodium fluoride or calcium fluoride. And then fluorite is just a common name for calcium fluoride. So as a mineral, it's calcium fluoride, it seems like most often. And then the fluoride salts are what occurs in the drinking water. I think that that is true. So let's keep reading. So after that, I was like, okay, awesome. Thank you so much. And then what I started to read about is like, okay, so where does the fluoride in our water come from? The base compound that is used to create fluoride in our water is called fluorosilicic acid. And again, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. So that's added to the water to create fluoride. And it wasn't incredibly hard to find, but I found it's this water treatment chemical supply chain profile. It's from the EPA, so it's a .gov. They just show like basically like where all of these compounds come from and then how they're added to the water. And we can link that in the show notes. It's very clearly laid out that the fluorosilicic acid is derived from phosphate rock and sulfuric acid. And so I just said to Kyle, hey, there's a common talking point that fluoride is derived from industrial waste. But in my opinion, this seems like a possibly true claim with a negative bent. So his reply to that was this. He says, regarding the fluorosilicic acid. It's going to get so much worse, by the way. So he says these are commonly used in the fluoridation of water, as you've stated. The phosphate rock and sulfuric acid reaction you're mentioning, which is where the fluorosilicic acid is derived from, it's kind of the industry standard for producing phosphoric acid for use in phosphate-based fertilizers, which I think is really, I guess it's just kind of an interesting connection based on the Maha episode with Kelsey, because that's like one of the largest like problems with like, you know, the enormous agriculture movement in the United States is that they use these phosphate-based fertilizers that have this pretty detrimental effect on nature. And I believe, again, somebody tell me if I'm wrong, that those came about as it's like it was a side product from weapons manufacturing, I think from either World War I or World War II. So it's like this really like fucked up game of telephone from like war to ag to water to public health. The war ag public health pipeline is what we're talking about here.
Oh my God, that's an episode.
I think that's the case. Go ahead.
Yes. No, I'm sorry to interrupt you. That just like, I'm going to put this out there so that I don't forget that we need to do an episode on the military industrial complex and how that has affected health, public health,
spam,
nutrition,
baby.
Recommendations.
Yeah.
That's actually a whole thing that you may not realize, but a lot of what we're eating today is because of that industry.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's all I want to
Totally.
say. Okay.
It's super interesting. There's like totally different RDAs for military personnel also. Did you know that?
No.
I learned that not long ago, because they have like much more caloric output and they have different likely like muscle mass to fat mass ratio. Anyway, yeah, they have a whole different set of recommended daily allowances. I learned that researching protein in females, which is a whole other episode. So anyway, so yes, it comes from phosphate-based fertilizer production. The production of fluorosilicic acid occurs as a byproduct of this reaction. And then he says this occurs all the time in the chemical industry. And if the compounds can be successfully separated, then there's really no reason that they can't be used. And they're called side compounds. If that's what people are referring to as derived from industrial waste, then that is kind of twisting the reality of what is occurring in a very negative way. There's a distinct difference between a compound that is produced through a side reaction and outright using industrial waste. Practically every reaction, especially those using raw materials such as phosphate rock, are going to inevitably have side reactions that produce byproducts. That is why purification and separation methods are so necessary in synthetic chemistry. They're not just to separate out the product from unreacted starting materials, but also to separate out multiple products that are many times produced by these reactions. Okay, and then this is where it got even more interesting. Hopefully people are like as enamored by the just straightforward chemist to take as we are. One of the major concerns in the use of this industrial produced fluorosilicic acid, again, produced as a side product in the wet process production of phosphoric acid, is the quality of the product. One of the claims to danger is that the fluorosilicic acid produced in this way is not adequately purified or QC'd. And I didn't look up what QC, quality controlled.
Quality control?
Yeah. And may contain high levels of heavy metals such as arsenic. I don't know if these claims hold any weight, as I don't know what the QC standards look like for the fluorosilicic acid that is added to drinking water, but I would think that those adding it to the water would want good QC reports to accompany each batch. If they don't do this, that would be, frankly, extremely irresponsible, to put it lightly. That may be something you want to check out further, essentially. Then he had other considerations that were even more like chemist-y.
Yeah.
He was amazing.
Bring it on.
Anyway, Kyle Carter, please let us mail you a check. I don't know, like however we can pay you back, take you out for dinner. He just laid it out like very black and white. And I will say, I appreciate the frank, like, here is what isness of scientists like that. Like one of my oldest friends is a chemical engineer, and he's just like, here is what a fatty acid is. There's no like health effect. He's just like, here's what it is from a chemical perspective. Like, God bless you.
Love
So
it.
from there, you know, it's like, okay, well, it is from industrial waste. It's a side product, apparently, is what it's called in the industry. And so I just started poking around to be like, well, how is it quality controlled? So there's, I guess, a couple different agencies that they ensure the quality of the different chemicals that are added to water. And I think this is something that for me has been, there's like two big considerations that I have when I'm thinking about fluoride and when I've been thinking about this episode. One is fluoride what we need to be like addressing in water?
Is that like the most pressing thing that's actually affecting our health, or is there stuff that's way fucking worse?
Yeah, we talk about magnitude a lot, which is like the impact, the size of the impact that something has on us. You know, when you're thinking statistically as in health science, that should be like, thank God for my good teachers to teach me this. It should be like the biggest thing you have on your mind is like, how bad is it or how good is it? And is the good outweighing the bad? Because there's always going to be a mixture of both. So is fluoride the thing, or is it just a popular thing that's going to get attention, right? Yeah. And then the second consideration I have that is, this is my side product, is that was a bad fluorosilicic acid joke. My second question is,
oh my gosh, I didn't get it. Of course, every time all the jokes always go over my head.
Because I loved like dad jokes, and you have probably a more like refined joke palette than my crappy jokes. The second consideration I have is, do the benefits of decreasing dental caries in people in the public outweigh the negative impact of adding fluoride to the water and what it can cause us? Because we do have some also really compelling research showing everybody likes to look in the gut for inflammation, especially in functional medicine. They're like, gut testing, look to the gut. Okay, and it is important. But really, like, I remember learning this in immunology and then being like, there's no way this is true. Most of the inflammation that we deal with systemically is in the mouth, right? So gum disease, caries, infected root canals, personal thing we're going through right now in our house. What do you do when the root canal is infected? It's like this whole horrible, situation you have to suss out. And so I'm like, man, one of the mechanisms of action of fluoride in the drinking water is that it's antibacterial, right? We're going to talk about that. Does the benefit outweigh the risk? And I don't know the answer to that. It's just like the big question mark that I have along with this one that we're currently discussing. So when you go to one of these agencies that ensures like the kind of the purity of the chemicals or the compounds added to water, one of them, the name is NSF. It's nsf.org. You can go on their website. You can look at about NSF, their mission and values, like what their whole deal is. They are one of the companies that ensures the purity of the fluorosilicic acid that is added to drinking water. Also, I think it's important to add, I think more than not, the fluorosilicic acid used in the United States is imported from China. It's not.
Interesting.
We make it here, and you can even see a map. I like really went down a rabbit hole here because I was like, if there's a fluorosilicic acid like factory near me in Boston, I was like, Andrew and I could just drive out there for the weekend. I could like call them and ask if I could interview somebody. We could play around disc golf and come home. This could happen. And there is actually one nearby, but the majority of it that's used in the United States drinking water supply is from China. I don't know, like, is all of that purity tested when it gets to the United States? Question mark. I have no idea, but one of the companies that does ensure purity is NSF. And so you can go on their website. We can put this again in the show notes, their whole deal, their public health and safety organization. So they have this search page for NSF certified drinking water treatment chemicals. So these are chemicals that are purposefully added to the water for all kinds of reasons, fluorosilicic acid being one of those. Should I share my screen and show this?
Yeah, okay. Share the screen. So if you're watching this on Substack, you can actually see this, because we're also going to talk about things that are not intentionally added to the water supply, but are contaminants and toxicants in the water that have serious health effects that are kind of just like not being talked about with the whole, like, Maha's focusing on fluoride, but like there's a bunch of really bad stuff in the water and it's getting worse. So we'll talk about that. But this is stuff that is intentionally added to the water for a purpose. But also, I don't know.
Holy
what
shit.
These things do to your health. Like So
when you're on this page, I don't think it'll reflect when I do the drop downs, as we're filming, but like you can search by manufacturer, trade name, chemical name. So just be interesting. Again, these are just like industry chemicals that the water this is my understanding, the water treatment industry adds to the water, to make sure that I think it's potable, really, is the end goal.
Like you can drink it. It's not going to kill you.
So it's in alphabetical order. I'm not going to read all of them, but like here's a nice smattering. Acetic acid, all types of aluminum, aluminum chloride, aluminum chlorohydrate, aluminum chlorohydrate polyalbanium chloride, aluminum hydroxychloride, aluminum sulfate. So if we're worried about aluminum, we might have a problem here. Amino trimethylene phosphonic acid, ammonia anhydrous, ammonium chloride, ammonium hydroxide, ammonium sulfate. Here's some more natural ones: ascorbic acid and bentonite. Interesting. Okay. Just general blended coagulation chemicals. I'm going to keep skipping down. Diethyl N-triamine penta, AC, dipotassium orthophosphate, different forms of iron, fluorosilicic acid. That's the one that we're talking about. Hemipotassium phosphate, hydrochloric acid. That's the one that we're familiar with. We give that as a supplement sometimes. We got a whole episode on it. Added to the water. Different forms of magnesium, different forms of manganese, miscellaneous chemical products. It goes on and on and on and on and on. Okay, so then there's a product function tab. And the reason that these are added is elucidated here. They're algicides, antifoamers, antioxidants, bactericides, biological substrate, chloramination, so to chlorinate the water, coagulation, flocculation. We're going to need Kyle to give us some definitions on that. Corrosion and scale control, corrosion control, dechlorination. If you chlorinate
and then dechlorinate,
or maybe if there's too much naturally occurring chlorine. Descaler, disinfection, oxidation. Again, it goes drilling fluid in case, you need to drill. It needs to be safe, right? So they test the purity. Again, this goes on and on and on and on and on. So it's...
Okay, this might be... Sorry.
No,
this might be a good time to mention that in the United States, the way we operate, I might need your help with this, Vic, as far as precaution around potential negative health outcomes for an additive, could be a food additive, could be all these things that are in the water, is different than other places. So we kind of we'll put stuff in the water, put stuff in the food until there's enough evidence to show that it's really harmful, and then be like, oh, oops, shouldn't have done that. I mean, we see that all the time with things that become outlawed. Like last time we mentioned triclosan, which is an antibacterial agent. Right. It took a while before there was enough evidence to show that it's actually really bad for you. And so they banned it in most things except for toothpaste, weirdly.
Because of the lobbyists, is what I remember. I mean, that's why. Colgate lobbied.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of other places operate on the precautionary principle, yes, which means we're going to be rational and think that this potentially could have a negative health outcome. So we have to prove that it's safe before we're going to use it. Right. Whereas here, it's we have to prove that it's not safe before we're going to take it away from public consumption. But until then, you can use it freely. It's fine. So with all of these things in the water, I would love to learn more about those. I know nothing about any of those, and to see studies on them in environmental science. Do we have any, what's the evidence? What do we have here? Anyways.
That's also my general understanding of the precautionary principle versus burden of proof is on us.
Yeah. Thank you that's what it's called.
And I think again, that is really highlighted. Do you remember a couple of years ago, this man sued Monsanto over claims that he had gotten sick from the glyphosate from Roundup, and he won that case, and it was this crazy surprising win, because Monsanto,
so
wheelbarrowed out,
so
a football team's worth of lawyers. And it's regulated differently in the United States than it is in some other countries. Who knows more about this than I do is I used to work at NTA with Meredith Kinzel-Zeider, and she was so clear about there's some subtleties, but by and large, I think that's the case. Yeah. So that's what else is there on purpose. And this company, NSW, I believe, NSF, excuse me, they are who is testing to make sure that these chemicals are quote unquote safe. So, and then I do not know the answer to this. Is every water district required to use only chemicals that have been checked and quality controlled? Can you just call, could I call, Boston Water Municipality and be like, hey, could I get a list of all of the chemicals in the water? And you're in my mind, I'm thinking of them, it's like a certificate of analysis, like, your testing showing that it's pure. I don't know. So anyway.
Yeah. Should we take it back to fluoride for a second and talk
yeah.
about the effects of fluoride on the body?
Let me forget about all of those. That's the headspace I was in when,
like we said, it's so much. It just like goes off on all these paths and you're like, where do I focus? I don't know.
yeah.
So
Let's go
this
back.
is just an overview of the systemic effects of fluoride exposure from your drinking water, from your toothpaste, from whatever, however you're getting it in. The first like main concern that people have, and myself included, is the effect of fluoride on the pineal gland. Now, we had an episode on melatonin with Dr. Deanna Minnick, and she talks about that. So if you're interested in why the pineal gland is important, definitely go back and listen to that episode. But the pineal gland is a gland outside of the blood-brain barrier, and its main function is controlling or regulating your sleep-wake cycle. So it's kind of like your master clock, of your body, which could sound like it's not that big a deal, but it actually is extremely important for all kinds of things, for metabolic health, for gut health, for mental health, for disease risk, for longevity, for cognitive health, all kinds of things. So you want a healthy pineal gland. It produces melatonin, I guess is what it's mainly known for, and melatonin regulates your sleep cycle. Also, on the episode with Dr. Minnick, we learned that your gut actually produces something like 400 times more melatonin than the pineal gland. So you do produce melatonin in other places, but I can't recall if that plays more of a role in regulating your appetite and hunger like cues and your motility than it does your sleep cycle. I'm not sure.
And just to know, like, melatonin too it's like arguably the strongest antioxidant available.
It does way more than put you to sleep. It's really has many, many functions, and she's done a lot of research on that, and go back and listen to that episode if you're interested. It's so cool. It is, yeah. But based on most of the research, the pineal gland is kind of sensitive to fluoride because it has a lot of blood vessels. It's outside the blood-brain barrier, so it's not protected. And so it's possible that it can kind of like accumulate fluoride and also calcium. And it kind of, both of those things, because of the way fluoride acts, it like calcifies the pineal gland. That's like the worry.
Right.
And some researchers think that it could be the most fluoride saturated organ of the human body. Now, in the beginning, Vic, you mentioned that 99% of fluoride that we ingest actually goes into your hard tissues, like your bones.
Yeah.
So now I'm really curious how much of that is making it into soft tissues, because there is some science showing that it can make its way to soft tissues, the pineal gland, but also the placenta, your like ligaments, your tendons, and even your aorta. I linked a study here if you want to learn more about that, but I don't know the percentage that makes it to those tissues. If so much is going to your bones, how much is going into the soft tissues? So something they talked about in this paper is that it's probably like kind of like a backup, like an excess. So like if like an overflow, I guess.
Right.
The overflow wouldn't go to your bones, it would go to the soft tissues in your body.
Do you think this is complete conjecture? So I'm like, I'm going to say it, but you should not take this as truth. This is a question I have. When people have calcification in their cardiovascular system, like you get a calcium score to understand cardiovascular disease risk.
Right.
Normally that's associated with inflammation. Like if there's like irritation, it's good just to kind of like, when you think inflammation, think like irritation. Sometimes it's good. We need to be like kind of irritated to help our immune system heal our body. But then like long term, that's problematic. I want to say like a higher calcium score is associated with that. And I wonder if fluoride could be like a response to an inflammatory process. I don't know.
So some people might be more susceptible to having it deposited.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Another thing they said is that they weren't sure if like a hypothesis they had was that like when we talk about things being calcified, could it be fluoride like initiating that? I'm guessing maybe causing inflammation, and then calcification also occurs from calcium. I don't know. They don't know. I mean, it is like you said, it's a question. Like
what's happening?
Is that a possibility?
Yeah.
But we do know that that fluoride can accumulate in the pineal gland. And pineal calcification is associated with less REM sleep, less sleep efficiency, more daytime sleepiness. And this is assumed to be because of the way it affects melatonin output, although I want to highlight that there are no human studies yet that look directly at fluoride intake and melatonin production in humans, only in animals.
That's so
we don't
responsible
know
of
a
you.
direct like causation. This is okay.
Yeah.
Just want to be clear about that. But it is something to be aware of because there have been studies done on fluoride exposure and sleep. So in 2019, there was a cross-sectional study based on the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey. So data that they collected from the years 2015 to 2016. And what they found is that for each 0.52 milligram per liter increase. So remember, water used to be fluoridated to 1 milligram per liter, and then now it's been dropped down to 0.71, I think, milligrams per liter.
Yeah.
So this study found it's a small amount, but 0.52 milligrams per liter increase in household tap water fluoride concentration was associated with a 1.97 times higher likelihood of adolescents reporting having sleep apnea at least once per week. And this finding was significant even after they kind of corrected for other things that could be affecting that. But overall, people who had higher water fluoride concentrations in their home had higher odds of snoring, snorting, gasping, and stopping breathing while sleeping at night. So those are like things that are part of sleep apnea. And this is in older adolescents. So in these studies, they didn't look at like kids because kids have a sleep variation. So they were looking at older adolescents because by that time their sleep has mostly regulated.
So this is interesting because it was the milligrams per liter was 1.2 and then they lowered it to 0.7. So they actually lowered it by 0.5 milligrams per liter.
Which would be this. And I wonder if it has anything to do with this evidence. But then, so that's just in your household tap water. So think about kids who are playing sports, so they're drinking more water. They're getting fluoride treatments, like all these other potential exposures. That's the thing that I'm like, keep coming back to is like, how do you control for that? How do you know how much you're getting? So in either this study or the next one that I'm going to talk about, they did actually look at like, I think urine and blood samples to like kind of see how much fluoride they had in their body. There's another study that was done in Canada, and this one was bigger. This was more than 5,000 people. And they found kind of a similar finding. So it was for every 0.5 milligram per liter higher concentration, there is a 34% increased relative risk of reporting sleeping less than an optimal amount. And they suggested that this could mean that higher fluoride exposure is associated with a sleep deficit, also in older adolescents and adults.
Yeah, this is the Journal of Environmental Health. I'm just looking at like the author information. This is interesting.
Yeah, so they
teamed up with people at Mount Sinai in New York, the Canadian authors. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And like I said, there's nothing that looks directly at fluoride and melatonin production. But in both of these studies, they're kind of like thinking that could be what's happening, is that because we know it does affect the pineal gland to some extent, could that possibly affect melatonin? And then that's affecting your sleep-wake cycle. I don't know. It's just worthwhile to look into. The other concern that a lot of people have is with IQ. So I know you mentioned that conspiracy, but actually, and this is why I'm like, it's not fair to like call somebody a conspiracy theorist because this is based on something. There is research that looks at cognition and IQ in kids who have fluoride, and it's kind of similar where it's like there's that margin of safety where like a little bit seems to be okay, but then when you pass a threshold, and this one was more than 1.5 milligrams of fluoride per liter. So really, again, that 0.5 milligram per liter difference, is associated with a lower IQ in children. So,
God, I wonder like what the mechanism is. Is that the
I don't know. That's what I didn't get a chance to look into that. I was curious. I do want to highlight that in this assessment, they said that It's important to note that there's insufficient data to determine if the low fluoride level of 0.7 milligram per liter, which is currently what they have it at in the United States, has a negative effect on children's IQ.
Man.
And they also found no evidence that fluoride exposure had adverse effects on adult cognition.
We have plenty of other shit to fuck us up.
So that is the thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's the date. I can't like comment further on that. It's just like, that is what is. That's what's out there. And
I think it would be really worthwhile to dig deeper into like what the mechanism of like, how did they even kind of start to question that, you know, like, because there's some like neurological effect that fluoride has. Man, yeah.
I don't want to like scare people because, so I mentioned listening to podcasts to prepare for this.
Let's really scare
I listened to. Yeah, you want to be freaked out? Listen closely.
Okay, so yeah.
We were going to play actually a clip from this because I was listening and it was so, what's the word for this?
Outlandish.
Mongering, like outlandish, yes. It's on the Wellness Mama podcast. She's interviewing a doctor, I think of dentistry, and it seems pretty clear to me that he has a bias against fluoride. He makes this one comment on topical fluoride and children dying. Should we play it?
Yeah.
And y'all can listen.
As I mentioned earlier, you can brush with anything, really, to strip the plaque off the teeth. But the hydroxyapatite toothpaste are the most exciting. Right.
Yeah, I guess most people have never heard a dentist say before, you can brush with anything. I know I got programmed early of like toothpaste looks a certain way, it comes out of a tube, it tastes a certain way, has to foam a certain way. And if we don't use it twice a day, then our teeth will fall out. Like I definitely had that. And then when I read the work of Weston A. Price and others, I was like, oh, and there's also a huge dietary component, for instance. There's a nutrient component that a lot of us don't understand. What about in-office fluoride treatments? Because I have some friends who don't use fluoride toothpaste. They filter it out of their water, but they seemingly are convinced by their dentist twice a year that their kids need to have this treatment on their teeth and that the risk is minimal because it's a short-term exposure.
Yeah, I'm heavily against that, strongly against any kind of fluoride varnish or any fluoride treatments at all. It's very harmful, Katie. I mean, if a child is to swallow some of that, it can ultimately kill them, but it'll definitely have a very negative effect quite quickly. So no fluoride varnishes, no fluoride treatment.
Okay, what the fuck? I listened to that and I was like, what?
Yeah.
It can kill them. That's so intense. And it was just kind of dropped in there. And then they continue. There's no like asking him to elaborate or
what do you mean?
Talk more about that. Very furious claim. So this is the kind of stuff that I hate. And if I was a mom, I am a mom, listening to that podcast and knowing nothing about fluoride, it's like immediately no. Like I'm like, no fluoride, no, terrifying.
Dude, that's the reason why people think functional clinicians are absolute bozos. And I hate that shit.
Right.
I get more mad at that, and I don't know why, than I do the shitty care that can come from conventional medicine. I hate it.
Yeah. It's so irresponsible. Yeah. It really is. It's irresponsible. You can't say that kind of stuff just like flippantly and not. So, okay. I listened to that. I was like, oh my God, am I missing this? Like, is this a thing? Surely, if this was a thing, they would not be doing topical fluoride at the dentist because that is way too high a risk. Okay. So I couldn't find a lot at all to
back this. Yeah.
Back it. I found a 1991 review of 87 cases of fluoride toxicity in kids. One child did die, but it was from eating an unknown amount of fluoride-based insecticide in their home, I'm guessing. It could have been the fluoride or the other stuff. I don't really know what else it contains. It's awful. I know that does happen. Yeah. Kids can ingest things that are toxic in the home. But otherwise, children who ingested up to 8.4 milligrams per kilogram of elemental fluoride in dental products had mild and self-limiting symptoms, mostly gastrointestinal. Mm-hmm. So I was like, oh, okay, I can breathe. This isn't as like scary, as lethal, I guess, as I thought from just hearing that clip on the podcast. Mm-hmm. So I thought, where is he getting this? It has to be from somewhere, right? Like you wouldn't just like say that. So I found an article from 1979 in the New York Times. And trigger warning, the article, if you read it, it talks about child death. But it is a case from a child who was at the dentist and they applied the varnish. And they say what happened is that the hygienist was not paying attention and she didn't rinse his mouth out and he swallowed all of it and it was lethal. Mm-hmm. I couldn't really find any information on like how concentrated that solution was.
Mhm.
And if it's the same concentration that we use today, or if she like was totally screwed up and gave him like an adult form or the wrong kind or like way too much.
Mhm.
Because everything that I found basically typing into Google, like mortality risk from fluoride varnish in children, it basically says that even if they swallow it, they might have the GI side effects potentially, but as far as it being lethal, doesn't seem to be concerned now.
Mhm.
So that's all I could find on it. I don't know. I can understand why parents still would be like, I'm not messing around with that.
Yeah.
Like if there's any,
Any chance?
grain of chance, like, but I don't know. I hear stuff like that and it's like, dude, come on.
Yeah.
You can't, that's wrong to, and then you kind of discredit everything else they're saying. So like he had great information, you brush your teeth with anything, just get the plaque off, like support your oral microbiome, like all that's great info. But then you drop this one like horrible
Mhm.
thing in there and I don't trust
I
you
know.
anymore. You said that.
Yeah,
But
dude, we brush our teeth with Nancy's yogurt and honey.
yeah, I mean, I never used fluoride toothpaste growing up and I never had any cavities, but also that's anecdotal
Yeah.
because genetically
Things-
we have good teeth in our family. You know what I mean? Like my
Totally.
grandma at 92 had all of her
Oh my
natural teeth. She
God.
had so it's, but also that led me to go down the rabbit hole of, does fluoride varnish at the dentist actually work?
Mhm.
Because if you're a parent taking your kid to the dentist, I don't want to say they're pushy with the fluoride, but they
Yeah,
are.
they're a little pushy,
Like
yeah.
they are. They kind of like, if you deny it and you don't want it, they kind of like are like, oh, you're one of those people, those conspiracy theorist people. But so they want to do it when your kid's there like twice a year. I guess that if a kid's at high risk, and I learned this from reading the Dental Association recommendations for it, they might recommend you do it more often. But systematic review that actually was in the Journal of Dental Caries. Yeah, Caries Research Journal.
Cool. And carie is a cavity, right? I mean, that's
yes.
Okay. Yeah, it's good for
a cavity.
Yeah.
So like a Journal of Cavities Research for dentists. This was a systematic review and meta-analysis, which is like a pretty high quality type of research. So they said that they concluded that fluoride varnish had a modest and uncertain anti-cavity effect in preschoolers. At the individual level, kids who got fluoride varnish only had a 12% reduction in cavities compared to those who didn't get the varnish. And then the kids that got the varnish might still get new cavities. So they said that this is kind of a modest benefit. And is it even worth it to have, you know what I mean? To have
the varnish. Yeah, and it looks like this was like a collaboration between researchers in Brazil and the United States. Department of Health Services. Guess what? We're not going to have studies from anymore based on funding cuts. Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, that's how I've always just kind of I've categorized fluoride as this like topical helper for the like hardness of teeth and preventing cavities. Varnish is just for kids, right? Like when I go to the dentist, I know they use like fluoride toothpaste in my mouth when they clean my teeth. I'm assuming it's fluoridated, but there's no varnish that they've ever offered me as an adult.
Guess so. I mean, I think they do it in some adults. It maybe depends on like how old you are and they stop eventually or something. And they said varnish, maybe it's whatever like topical thing they put on the kid and then they're like rinse it out, or no, they just leave it on there at our dentist. They don't even make him rinse it off, and they're like, just don't eat for 10 minutes or something.
Yeah,
or don't brush until bedtime or something like that. Just leave it
years
on there.
ago, a dentist I still adore in Northern California, he was a biochemistry undergrad, and he explained, I asked him about fluoride because I was in my how do they say it? I'm in my like era. I was in my like crunchiest era. And I was like, I don't want the fluoride. And he was like, well, can you just tell me why? And I was like, I heard. And he was like, hey, listen, here's the deal. Like the way that it interacts with the tooth, it like actually chemically goes in and creates this little like strong structure. And I just was like so impressed and respectful, and I like really trusted in what he had to say that I was like, oh yeah, okay, it's a topical treatment. But it's interesting to see. I mean, is 12% worth it if we know that there might be some risk?
Kind of what they were saying in their dentists.
Yeah.
So I think like we're obviously, by the way, science is always changing.
Right.
It's never going to be like absolute. And that's the whole point. So, we started off with putting 1 milligram per liter in the water. And then we're like, oh, we need to drop it to 0.7 and,
Yeah.
consider like potential risks. I do think it's important to like also understand that there's other things that are really important for prevention of cavities.
Totally.
You mentioned like the oral microbiome. And I didn't know this, but the oral microbiome is second to the gut in diversity and number of bacteria, fungi, viruses, and protozoa. So it has a huge community in there, and you need all of those good microbes. Just like in your gut, you can develop oral dysbiosis where it shifts and you have more opportunistic or pathogenic microbes versus good ones. And you can support that. This is kind of similar to how you support your gut microbiome with like your diet. Like, what are you feeding them? What you're eating? The foods you're eating, those bacteria are breaking it down and producing like beneficial metabolites, I guess, to protect you. And that's one of the reasons I think that, they tell you to avoid like sugary stuff because that can cause, I might be wrong here, that can cause the bacteria to produce an acidic metabolite that can break down. So it really has to do with your oral microbiome, like is the whole thing that's happening with cavities. And then there's also like the role of vitamins in that, in your teeth health, because your teeth are bones. So vitamin A, D, E, K2, vitamin C and E, the antioxidants. I linked a paper here that's just a review, and it's talking about the importance of those vitamins. They are referencing a lot of Weston A. Price's work, which we've done an episode on the Weston A. Price Foundation. He was really big in fat soluble vitamins because he did notice people who had more of those in their diet had really good teeth. He was a dentist. And people who didn't had poor bone development in their mouth and higher risk of cavities. I don't know how, I think it's more, like I said, it's a review. So it's kind of like, we should consider these things. It's not like hard bench science. And then another 2020 bigger study, like a systematic review and meta-analysis, they concluded that there's weak evidence to show that vitamins play any part in oral health. I find that hard to believe, but I just wanted to put that in there to show, to say, you might hear both sides of it. A 2022 retrospective study in the US did find that severe vitamin D deficiency, which a lot of people actually have vitamin D deficiency, is really common because we stay out of the sun. We use sunscreen. Vitamin D is really hard to get in foods. Sunlight is one of the best ways if you're not supplementing. So if you wear sunscreen, you're not getting very much vitamin D. If you're staying out of the sun, depends on your skin tone, how dark your skin is, how light your skin is.
And I'll tell you clinically, I saw that if people came in and they had low vitamin D, there was a part of our intake that asked about oral health. There were problems in their mouth with oral health. And you can see on somebody's blood test pretty quickly what their vitamin D levels are. It's like people run that.
Yeah, it's so easy to test. And you can get it up with supplements or sunlight exposure and vitamin D foods. So in this, they found that deficiency doubled the risk of dental caries, which I guess are cavities, with an odds ratio of 2.261, which is actually, that's really strong. And then other things influenced it as well. A higher BMI, low socioeconomic status increased the risk. There's probably multiple reasons why that is. It's not just because of how much money you make. It's your lack of resources.
And that's the question. It's okay, so you and I, and so many people, it's they are aware and getting, the kid, the nutrients, and us ourselves, everybody, the nutrients, and doing all these things. It's from a public health standpoint, I understand, add the fluoride to the water to keep, on average, we have this curve. It's most people healthier in their mouth. From an individual health standpoint, I'm I don't want to drink it. Well,
I know.
It sucks. To me, it kind of brings back to this feeling that I remember I had when I started to have animals. Anybody else has had animal husbandry? It's different than animals in the wild. You have to deworm them. You have to vaccinate them. They will get sick and die. It's messed up, because they're in this small area. They're more prone to disease. There's more competition for resources. We are animals in the cage now. We just are. And the people who have access to more resources can take care of themselves better. And so they're probably well, I don't want to mess with the whatever intervention might carry some amount of risk, because to me, it doesn't matter. But to the people as a whole, or people who don't have the resources, they do need those interventions. I'm not even the one going to school for public health. I feel like more and more,
Right.
I'm like, I get it, but it also takes some trust in the powers that be. And personally, my bias runs where I'm like, I don't trust them as far as I could throw them. I trust the ideas.
Yeah.
I trust people individually, but bureaucracy, I don't trust my health with that. So
No.
man, it's a rock and a hard place.
It is. And the whole like fluoride, getting fluoride out, that being the whole MAHA thing, it's, I feel like, really similar to what we were talking about with food dyes versus like them taking, them going after food dyes versus taking farm to school
Away,
programs
yeah.
out and cutting those. It's like, that doesn't make any sense. And I think Kelsey Keener in that episode made a good point. He's like, it's like you're dangling this carrot, this like one thing, which is like the food dyes or the fluoride in the water to distract people, and then doing all this other stuff. It's just a distraction. It's like, or we're going to placate you and like say, oh, we'll do this, but we're also going to do this stuff. Don't worry about that. Because like we were talking about, there's all kinds of other stuff in the water. And right now it's the greatest like rollback in environmental regulations ever. So like that means we're going to have more byproducts from mining, like heavy metals like lead and cadmium are going to be potentially getting into the water supply. PFAs,
Hannah,
perfluorinated alcohol,
good luck.
and PFAs, the forever chemicals that are, have risks for cancer and endocrine disruption. Those regulations are changing. And so those can be in the water supply too. We're going to link, or we did link in the show notes, where you can check your tap water. The Environmental Working Group has a tap water resource where you put your zip code in and you can see like what might be in your water. And, it's easy to say you need to get a water filter. Not everybody can do that. I will say that Consumer Labs did a report on water filters.
That's awesome, because I'm always to date, I have no idea if the filter that we're getting is doing shit.
Okay, yeah. So what I took away from what they did is that you don't always need like this really expensive water filter, because that's like a big thing in like the crunchy or like functional wellness community, is like, the Berkey filter, the who knows what it is now. And they're always really expensive and inaccessible to a lot of people. But the Brita filter that you get at Target, I think works just as well.
I'll put those an episode on
the show notes for people.
Yes.
Yeah, because there was only one that actually leached plastic into the water, like the container, because they're always hard plastic, right? Which a lot of times is pretty stable, I think. Like there's of course concern about plastics leaching, and there was only one of the ones they tested that did leach plastic, so that would be like the one to avoid for sure. But once I read that, I went and got a pure, it's like PUR filter.
Yeah.
Kind of like a Brita filter, and you get it. It's like $20. It's a water jug. The replacements you change every 2 months. They're like, I don't know, $10 to $20, or you can get the coupon. So it's significantly less than like a $600 fancy water, or like the under sink, which is like $2,000.
And there's problems
like
that come with that, because like let's say it's reverse osmosis. I farmed for a long time and we RO'd our water, and I'll tell you what, there's nothing in that water. It's like there's no minerals. There's problems with that, because
you don't want that. Yeah. So I don't know. Now I'm still, this is making my brain like spin out of control, because this is just so much to think about. I feel like we covered everything we had in our document, even though I know we could go off way more, and maybe we'll get someone who knows listening and wants to come on and talk to us about this. That would be like the effect of fluoride on cognition and like what's happening there.
Or just somebody who works in water treatment. Like I would love just a regular, person who doesn't have a dog in the fight to be like, here's what this looks like in real time at like a municipal water treatment facility. That would be so cool, you know? Yeah.
I do believe like at the heart, like no one's trying to necessarily hurt you, like public health is its own thing. And we do have to make these, like they have to make these big decisions based on like averages and like kind of what they think could be best, but knowing there are like risks. And when we release Jeff Futch's episode, I feel like he explained that really well, and that'll be coming up soon, talking about like, can you trust scientists?
Yeah, I think like
are they
before this episode, people will get that one, so they may have listened to it already. I wish we had a better takeaway. Now you're just as confused as we are.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Please leave us a review if you enjoyed this episode. Let us know.
She's gonna be like,
give us a
"Fuck
star.
you." Thanks for not
Tell
an
us how much you
asshole.
hate us. Always here to confuse
Oh,
you more.
Hey,
That's
and we're a
insensitive.
year old. I think that's worth celebrating. I haven't posted anything on our, like our platforms about that, but we started this in June of 2024, and our deal was like, okay, we're going to publish 2 episodes per month, and then we upped that to the extra episode for subscribers. This is our 33rd or 4th. We're starting to be real podcasters, Hannah.
I know. Yeah. And we have we've reached over 12,000.
Oh my God.
downloads.
Now I think we're over 13,000. Let's look.
So thank you, everyone listening. That's amazing.
Totally. And keep giving us feedback. And if you are a subject matter expert, please tell us, because we sure as shit aren't. We're just like trying to explore those in a way that's balanced and like hopefully bias conscious. Yeah, we're 13.5 downloads. Totally. Thank you so much. Okay. Anything else?
I don't think so. This is a long one, but I think it was worth it because it's a big topic and it's important.
It's very important for a lot of reasons. Okay. Yeah. Have a good Sunday.
You too. See you soon.